And joining us now from Chicago, NBC's Mike Memoli and Andrea Mitchell, also Maya Wiley, president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights.
So, Mike, as we look ahead to day two, night two, former President Obama, we all recall, made his big national debut 20 years ago at the Democratic National Convention. He's now making the case for Kamala Harris. What can we expect tonight?
Well, this is, of course, a hometown convention for former President Barack Obama, and he's going to be speaking really to a much more politically engaged audience, talking about why he believes, according to a source familiar with his remarks, that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are exactly the leaders that this country needs right now. He has a relationship with Kamala Harris going back 20 years. They campaigned for one another. Actually, Harris endorsed Obama in his 2008 campaign at a time when many in the state of California were supporting Secretary Clinton. They've maintained a close relationship. And he's going to talk in the way a former president often does, raising the stakes of the election, talking at a higher level about the office of the president and why Kamala Harris is ready to succeed him. But let's not sleep on the fact that Michelle Obama is also speaking tonight. We've talked so much about the fact that so many people, especially when this was a Biden-Trump race, were not really interested in this election. Michelle Obama can speak to them directly because she's one of them. We have often heard from her associates that she is not a political person. She actually is not a campaign person. But so she can talk much more about the personal qualities of Kamala Harris. She can defend her against the attacks that we're seeing on Kamala Harris and really speak directly to those kinds of voters who have been on the sidelines but maybe are just tuning into this race right now.
Yeah, I mean, Andrea, the question many may have is who's the bigger star? I mean, we're going to be hearing from both Barack and Michelle Obama, but what does it say that 7 years after leaving the White House, she is still a headliner at the DNC and is really one of our country's global stars?
Absolutely. Michelle Obama is the biggest figure, political. I mean, she's really a superstar on the political stage. And she doesn't like politics, does not do politics, and probably would not be here if not for Kamala Harris, because she was never that close to the Bidens, frankly. There was always some residual tension there. So the fact that she is here tonight in her hometown of Chicago as one of the headliners is fascinating, and she's going to be one of the biggest stars of this convention. Of course, we know that Harris and Walz are in Milwaukee, not far from here. They're going to be at the same arena that the Republicans were at for their convention, and in some ways competing or probably satelliting into the prime time here. But I doubt very much that would be to interrupt Michelle Obama's appearance. More likely it would be something else, even Barack Obama. But nothing will probably interrupt, unless I'm really wrong about that as they test the mics behind us. Michelle Obama is the big headliner tonight.
And so the country will be anxiously awaiting their remarks. It's been a few years since we've heard a big speech from either of the Obamas. Maya, as they make the case for the vice president, what's the significance of tonight for Kamala Harris?
Well, it's hugely significant because we know the popularity both of President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, and also because remember that Barack Obama ran on the audacity of hope, and his message in many ways was fairly similar to Kamala Harris's, although her language is very different, the times are very different, but the symbolism for the country, for all of us, that we have a future that sees the possibility of a woman of color becoming the first woman and a woman of color to be president is not going to be lost on any of us.
Mike, you know, going back to President Biden last night, he received a standing ovation even before he spoke. How are those in Biden world feeling about his speech last night?
Well, it was really quite a moment. I was watching on the floor as the convention hall really just erupted. The depth of affection and love and respect for his service, even from some of those Democrats who were worried about his candidacy and wanted him to step down, was really palpable in the room last night. And you could see the emotion from President Biden, especially after that moving introduction from his daughter. The Biden advisors I've been talking to were very proud of their boss last night. They felt that this was a speech he could have given as the nominee if he was still in this race. He gave a forceful defense of his record. It was, of course, adapted, though, to highlight the ways in which he feels that that Vice President Harris has been an important partner for him in the White House. And he also was very direct in talking about the threat he still believes Donald Trump poses to our democracy. That's not something we've heard Kamala Harris talking as much about since she's become the nominee. And that's an important role that President Biden can and will continue to play. You heard the president last night. He's not done. He has a lot on his plate he still wants to do before he leaves office, and that includes campaigning aggressively for Harris and against Trump.
So many of the Democratic Party heavyweights coming out for this convention to make the case for Vice President Kamala Harris, including former First Lady, former Secretary of State, former Senator Hillary Clinton, who unsuccessfully ran against former President Trump in 2016. Here's some of what she said.
It is no surprise, is it, that he is lying about Kamala's record. He's mocking her name and her laugh. Sounds familiar. But we have him on the run now. We have to fight for Kamala as she will fight for us. Because you know what? It still takes a village to raise a family, heal a country, and win a campaign.
Andrea, how significant is it for Hillary Clinton to make the case for Vice President Harris?
It was incredible last night. That was one of her best speeches ever, if not her best speech ever. She seems liberated. She is totally reconciled now with the devastating loss in 2016. And she was signifying by passing the torch to Kamala Harris that she feels, and many of her supporters feel, that she paved the way. Because Kamala Harris is not really emphasizing gender, aside from the issue of abortion, but the glass ceiling that she would be breaking if she becomes president. That's not as central a core mission for her as it was an argument by Hillary Clinton in 2016 and previously in 2008 when she lost the primary to Barack Obama. It's almost as though Hillary Clinton made it more acceptable for Americans, men and women, to understand and welcome the idea of a woman as president, and made it easier, just as she referenced all the women who've run before her. She referenced Shirley Chisholm, whom I first met and covered in 1972 as a kid reporter, and just all of the path breakers, the women in history, you know, who have gone through so much. Her mother, Dorothy, in this hometown of Chicago for the Clintons. The right to vote, the passage finally of the 19th Amendment was just 2 days ago, with one man's vote, one delegate, after getting a letter from his mom. And that was, 100+ years ago, 104 years ago, I think. So that's what she was talking about, the progression of women's history. And it was such a generous, non-resentful, open-hearted, enthusiastic celebration and appeal, the rally, the crowd. It went over really well.
Andrea, you say that you interviewed Chisholm for the first time in 1972. There's such a wealth of knowledge and experience that you bring. And we want to talk about path breakers. You, Andrea, are one of those people that continue to show just what it is to be experienced and know what you know. But Maya, for many people, this week is the vice president's introduction as the Democratic nominee for president. Last night, we heard from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who became emotional, recounting a story where the vice president comforted her when she was a new member of Congress. We also heard from the VP's childhood best friend, who talked about Harris sticking up to bullies. What does it say about the efforts to help Americans learn who the vice president is from those that know her best?
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful way to show the country who Kamala Harris is through the lens and the actual experiences of people who know her. Having sat here last night, you could really feel the entire convention feeling it at the same time. Hard to know how it was taken at home, but I would say it had to have been very powerful because Representative Crockett was so human. Right. It was such a personal story. And I think the other thing is, like any convention, you are trying to make sure that the public knows who the candidate is for themselves, not as framed by the other side. That's why Kamala Harris is not talking about Donald Trump, except to say it to my face. But it is very, very powerful to have people share their stories. And I just want to say one other thing, because Andrea is exactly right about Hillary Clinton and her speech. But the other thing that Hillary Clinton was doing in that speech is reminding all of us why it is such, and she said these words, she said, the dream of the ceiling broken, and that was meaningful for a whole bunch of people. And some of the stories that we were hearing from the other participants, including Jasmine Crockett, was exactly the same story about how Kamala is also broad shoulders for others.